And we are now live.
All right. This is continuation of Senate Appropriations Committee. We're hearing on the FY 2022 budget. And the next department that we're taking testimony from is the Department of Human Resources. And we have the commissioner, and I will let the commissioner introduce the staff that she has here. I see Brenda Berry's back. So if you will introduce your staff, Commissioner, that would be great. And then and then I will leave it up to you in terms of how we want to proceed. As you know, we tend to want to know more of the highlights and probably, and I know you must have a budget summary, so we'll work from that and try to use this as an opportunity for you to update us on some things that you think are undertaking. I'm pretty interested in your work and how we're proceeding on a replacement of our Willis system. So it'll be a little bit more free floating than it might be in the other body, to put it bluntly. So welcome, Commissioner. We'll get started. So I see two of you. I'm working off an iPad, so I'm limited on the number of faces I can see. So I'll rely on you to introduce your staff. And you're muted. You're muted. And Angela's muted, and Dan is muted, and Brenda's muted.
Of course I'm muted, of course, right? You have to start out that way. All right, well, good afternoon, Senate Appropriations. Thanks for having Department of Human Resources here. So with me today from the Department of Human Resources is Dan Pouliot, who's the Deputy Commissioner, Harold Schwartz, who's our Director of Operations, and Angela Ruel, who is our Director of Strategic Operations. And then also with the Agency of Administration, I'm going to call them the business office, but central office, not even central office, but anyway, Sean Benham is our budget person. Brenda Berry is the deputy CFO as well. It doesn't look like Holly Anderson, the CFO, is here, but special. Okay. Of course, thanks to all the Sean and team for putting our actual budget together. So it's a lot of work. And do
you have a document that you want to share, or tell Chrissy and she will put it up? And but you don't need to, just let us know when you want it.
Yeah, done. I believe that I can share our budget book, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking from. So okay. I believe I'll share that. First, I just want to say that how proud I am as the whole Department of Human Resources team. They're a very strong team committed to state service, and our team, DHR, Department of Human Resources, kind of we're a part of the Agency of Administration, and like others in the Agency of Administration, we're like the back office of state government. We support other departments and all things employee related, from paying employees on time, helping recruit talent workforce, statewide training, working with our valued labor partners on a whole host of benefits and wellness issues. And I think I'm going to pull up the budget book right now. If I'm successful in in my Zoom stuff.
And Commissioner, if you get stuck, let me know. I can help you out.
Okay, great. I'm going to share the screen, and it's going to share the wrong thing, but I think I can flip it quickly over the budget book. So if you all can see our budget book, it's got the state capital.
Yes. Yep. We have it.
Different state capital than in my background, which is wintertime. This is spring or summer. So
right.
There's our budget book.
Though.
Okay, great. And if you don't, I think you probably should have the budget book. But if you look at pages, zip down a little bit. I'll zip back up to there, but starting on page 5, it's all of the divisions in Department of Human Resources and a description of what they do. So, you can kind of go through that, but we have Harold's names up there, and we've got the classification and position management, benefits and wellness, reporting and compliance. We've got recruitment, we call it talent acquisition now, and compensation, workforce development division, which has CAPS, which is the Center for Achievement in Public Service up at Vermont College. We have that group. We've got field operations, which are what people kind of think of when you go to HR with a problem, that's who you go to as our field people. So they're our HR business partners. They work for the DHR department, but they have, the Agency of Human Services will have a couple of human resources partners working for the various departments and agencies there that they go to with their typical day-to-day HR issues and problems and for help. And then what's else? And then we do labor relations, as I mentioned earlier, and we have legal services, which comprises also employment misconduct investigations under there. And then HR operations and the strategic development division. When you think of the VTHR operations, that's our payroll system. That's our human capital management system. That's all under that division. And that's really about it for that. It's kind of who we are. Retirement division. Retirement is under the state treasurer's office. So when people think of the public, sometimes in some places, employee retirement is under in some organizations under human resources. It's not here in state government. So we work closely with the retirement office and coordinate with them on a lot of issues because it's dealing with the employee pensions and whatnot, and when they're ready for retirement and benefits in retirement, but they are clearly under the retirement group. On page 10, which I can get to right
We're on
up
11.
here. Okay, page 10, if you can see that, it's kind of a pictorial version of what we do. So it's got some of the numbers that we track in DHR. And what we try to do is put just a little snippet of what each division does. So we've got a wellness program, we have an incentive program, and about a fifth of the state employees participated in that. Our training division, one of the things we wanted to point out is since preventing and addressing sexual harassment was mandated, we've had over 10,000 employees participate in that training.
So that's a cumulative
Complete that
figure, Commissioner.
Yes. Yep. All new
Commissioner?
employees take the training. Yep.
Just quickly, top right, percent of
Yes.
investigations completed within 90 days.
Yes.
Just on its face, that doesn't seem like a good statistic. Is that? Or is it?
So if you look at where we came from, when we look at in 2018, where we only had, so one of the things that we want in investigations of employee misconduct is to complete them as quickly as possible, but we also need them to be thorough, of course. We want to make sure that, so we have an internal target of having them completed in 90 days. That's not the actual average, but for example, in 2018, we were down an investigator. We had only completed 35% of them within 25 days. So it shows that the vast majority are completed well within that benchmark. It's kind of an internal benchmark. I think on average, it's like a 50-day completion.
Okay.
And that's just, but that's one of the benchmarks. And we're trying to keep it consistent from year to year so that you're seeing the same thing.
Okay.
And this has been, this actually, I just want to point out is a real positive trend because for some of us on appropriations, there have been back in the past, the length of time for investigations and for employees that are being paid, they're on paid leave for prolonged periods of months pending an investigation. It's not only, it's costly, but it was also not bringing a complaint to resolution. So this from 35 to 93 to 94 is dramatically different. And it was a source of concern that we raised with the department and getting investigations completed in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and we've been working actually just to add on Chairman Kitchell. We've been trying to do a couple of things with our investigations. One of the things that we've been doing is trying to get a better way to track where we are at each stage of the investigation. So we do have a database that we track information. We've upgraded that and we put out a manual. So everybody that's entering information into there is entering things more consistently so that we have a better ability to look and see where each investigation is at any stage. because that actual investigation number is only a part of it. That's what our that's what the investigators do, but there's kind of some pre-investigation. There's a lot of post-investigation where once we do the report, the appointing authority looks at that and analyzes it and then has to determine if discipline should be imposed and what they should do. So getting the full picture of that has been really important. So we've been working on that for, I would say, a year or two, kind of getting that in line. Now, actually, what we're doing is we're, one of the things that Angela, as one of our process improvement people, are taking on is just kind of looking at it from the beginning to the end and seeing if there are, just kind of working that through kind of the continuous improvement process. So we're always working to make that better. We know it's been kind of a bone of contention and not a bone of contention, but it's just, it's a process, and we'd like that process to be as succinct and as timely as it possibly can be. Because
yeah, I guess I was just responding to, didn't seem like 90 days was a great metric, but what you're saying is that the majority are concluded 50 days or so.
Right, the investigative part of it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move on to our healthcare plan premium rates. So one of the things that I think we're really proud of is we have not increased our healthcare premium rates. This is the third year in a row of 0% increases. And so that's great for employees because they don't have to take more out of their paychecks to pay for their health insurance, and great for the state because that's not an upward budget pressure and hasn't been. So that's good news. Staff members analyzed 729 requests for a classification review last year. So we have a lot of job classes. We do a lot of job reclassifications every year. That is something that you will see later on in our budget that we have included some money in there, $125,000 as an up. We've included that in there to get us to do some more work on our job classes and try to get ready for reclassification, where we're going to, we have about 1,800 job classes now. We're trying to pare that down and get it ready to be pared down to a lot fewer job classes. And that's something that we're going to have to do at any point. And doing that, plus getting our system ready to go out to bid, is the money that we have in there. So it doesn't actually, the money that we've put into our budget for fiscal year 22 doesn't change our classification system, but it gets us on our way. And one of the things that we let the House Appropriations Committee know was that we were planning on doing a couple of presentations, more detailed presentations on our plan, and we can invite any member who's really interested in that. We'll try to set up a time for that. We're going to have a similar presentation to the VSEA. Early on, before the pandemic, we hired a consultant to kind of take us through the steps on what we would need to do to update our classification and compensation system. We met with Ledge Council, we met with VSEA, we met with a lot of different people to see everything that were, all the issues with the system. So all that is kind of the outcome of the consultant's report and then where we're going to next.
So when you're saying the system will be ready to go out to bid, are you talking about a bid on a replacement system to Willis? I wasn't quite sure when you said system ready to go out to bid. What system was referencing?
A replacement system for the Willis system.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And new committee members, this is something that this committee has focused on, and that is our Willis classification system. And in the budget, there are oftentimes, sometimes millions of dollars that are associated with position reclassifications. And there are many, many different well, you said 1,800, plus their steps. And so we're constantly, there's a very natural desire to have requests for jobs to be reclassified, usually upward. And but it's a very expensive, very complicated system that has been in place since I can't even, I know when it was done because I was on one of the appeals three-member people to view appeals on classifications. And it was a long time ago. It was probably what, in the mid 80s?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, and the system we have now is outdated, and our classification and compensation systems are so intertwined, also intertwined with our contract, that that a lot of it is, there's a lot of unpredictability there. So what we're looking for in a new system would be predictability. That's, I know, one thing that the legislature has really been looking for. It's not necessarily going to save money, but we will be able to predict more if classification or reclassification is going to have an impact on salaries. And so there will definitely, once a new system comes in place, there's a lot of procedures that we have that are related to our classification system, but also related to our pay charts. So depending if we decide we want to go with a whole new compensation system as well, those are all items that we need to work with the unions on.
Okay.
So it's not a quick process, but in the end, when we come out on the other side, I think it will be well worth it from all parties.
So the 729, those are total number of members. Obviously, some classes have got large, like correctional officers or, whatever. So the 720, how many classes does that represent?
It was 729 classes.
I said staff members. That's what I was.
Oh, 3 staff members. We have 3 classification analysts.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
3.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was putting
No,
the
it's
3 with
fine.
sorry. Okay. I was reading, I was interpreting it that those are the number of 729 were individual members analyzed for their classification, but I need to go to the next thing, which is that the 729
Yes.
is actually the arrow then results in, that's the number of requests. Okay.
Senator
Yeah.
Starr.
Yeah, Senator Starr.
A lot of times when you hear state people talking, especially the higher up they are, the more they use the number, they'll refer to 6,800 state employees, or a number that I've never heard one say, well, we have 10,071 state employees, but I see that at the top of the chart that you're showing us. And is that a fair number to use if somebody asks you?
No.
The best place to go, and I'm going to pivot over there. I'm just going to change, if you can see, let me see. Can you see my screen? I switched over to the workforce report, which is probably one of the best reports that that the legislature should look at, because if they're looking at employees, because it really talks about how many employees we have, how much they're paid, the number of employees over time. And it's there should be a link on your website, but if you go to the in the table of contents, we've got number of executive employees and full-time equivalents by departments. We have one that there's just tons of statistics here. I'm just going to show you like 1 or 2 things that you can see in here, Senator Starr.
Yes.
That paints a pretty good picture for you. It's going to be this one. So here is the number of executive branch employees by fiscal year. So you look at in 2020, and it tells you by exempts versus classified. So in 2020, the end of fiscal year 2020, we had 8,317 employees, full-time equivalents in the executive branch. So that's kind of a snapshot in time. It's the amount we had on June 30th, 2020. But you can see in this chart how it's changed over time. You can see number of classified versus exempts, how, the ebb and flow. And if you look on our website, I think it may even go back further. We have another page on our website. But
So what is the 10,071 represent? Does that mean if every position was filled?
No, that has to do with the number of employees cumulative who received the training.
Yep. So
So,
that 10,000, yeah.
so
Okay.
what that does is, that would be new people and old people. So it's a cumulative number. And as people retire or leave government, then a new employee would come in. So that gets added. So it's not a point in time. It's an additive number.
Yeah. Okay,
I think
But
I
that-
figured that one out, Beth, right?
That was great.
Yeah.
that's kind of deceiving though, if it says of state employees. Oh, trained, then you have to go over where it says trained in preventive and, okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. That's about
You're
like
right.
me looking at 729 staff members analyzed. So yeah, you have to look at it pretty carefully.
Yeah,
But the book that Beth is referencing, it just tells you everything. It talks about, length of service, the gender, I mean, it breaks down. It's a treasure trove of information about the state workforce. It
Yeah,
must take quite a while to put together.
it's a big deal for our department, and it's something that when it comes out each year, it's kind of interesting to see what happens. One of the interesting statistics we had in the previous year was that there was a higher than normal, I think it was last year, higher than normal number of retirements, like a big year for retirement. And then in 2020 was down. So you kind of look at what's going on, and then you try to figure out if there's any type of particular thing you can point to. So there's the data, and then there's also, I wonder why some of this happened. So it leads us to kind of think more about the workforce and what we're doing. There's also, and it's been in here for a long time, there's a lot of statistics regarding the BIPOC community. So we calculate things and we look at it based on the federal requirements and how we report race and ethnicity, and they categorize those into minority categories. But you can look in the workforce report. There's a lot of data and statistics in there, and I think it's a good thing that a lot of people are starting to look at that and take notice of what's happening. So if we know what it looks like, that's the first step, and if we need to make changes on how to do that. So there's been a lot of notice as to that, and that's been in there for a while. So those are there. It talks about wage differentials between men and women, which there really aren't any. So that's a good thing, right? As I said, we do payroll. So we processed a lot of paychecks in a year. Every 2 weeks, we do a pay period. And so that's everybody in the on all 3 branches of government. We process their paychecks. This is a new statistic we added this year, and it's just.
I guess we should fund you, Beth.
Yes. Well,
You process our payments.
yeah, as Beth knows, ours probably the smallest of most state employees.
I don't think we're not in their report under classified. We would bring down that wage differential.
You folks certainly do work hard for the dollars that you earn.
We want our wages, how do you reclassify? Is that how we ask, Jane?
Yeah. You want to have a position reclassification
Yeah,
request.
reclassification.
So we'll keep going on the slide here.
Yeah, I think the far right, bottom right, and that's kind of the a lot of information that we have out of our recruitment system. So we can pull out number of applications, number of applicants. So there's a lot of good information, and a lot of that stuff is in the workforce report as well. And then just that you can start to see the trend in 2020, and you're going to see it more in 2021. But cases managed under the Federal Family Leave Act, that's really regarding employees right to take leave. It's not necessarily on what leave they took, but it's a entitlement on their ability to take leave with job protection. That increased, certainly increased more in fiscal year 21 with the new federal, with the new, it was a Families First Coronavirus Response Act, put in some new temporary family medical leave entitlements. So the number of cases, and we have to track those cases to make sure that we're meeting the law. So that number is going to go up, and it's a lot of documentation that we have to collect from the employees. But we in DHR need to make sure that we're in compliance with all the federal statutes, and that's a lot of the work we do. It's not really, it's a lot of the stuff we do is making sure that as an employer, we're meeting all the state laws, the federal laws, all the rules, labor rules, et cetera, and complying with union contracts. So a lot of the work we do is really about making sure that
So taking that 1,423 cases against your total workforce of 8,000 whatever, it's a very significant number, because I would assume other a lot of leave is taken under sick leave that people have accrued, and that's not part of the 1,423, or is it?
It could be. It depends on if they're taking as part of, if that leave qualifies under the federal protected leave. So if you go out for surgery, or if you're sick for more than a few days, or if it requires a doctor's visit, a lot of that stuff would be kind of trackable under family medical leave. And a lot of it is, it's really tracking for compliance. So our contract and our state laws are actually more, I'll say the right word. The federal standards are kind of the minimum. Our state laws are actually provide more leave protections. And our union contract actually provides even more than that. So we do have additional above and beyond, but it might not be qualifying as leave under the family medical. So it's really complex when you're putting all those together. But for federal purposes, we do need to make sure that employees are getting what they're entitled to. And what happened this year is things that previously were not covered under the federal law ended up being covered. So if you were on leave for taking care of your children because their schools were closed, in the past, under the federal law, that would not be FMLA. Now we still would have to allow the use of sick time for that under the union contract as well as under the state law, but we wouldn't track it under federal leave. Because of the changes that Congress made during the pandemic, that was now trackable under the family leave. So the case numbers rose, and also a lot of employees had to take more time off because schools and daycares were closed.
So what happens to that work? Who picks up the work with those 1,423 gone? Do we have to hire extra help, or do you know that?
It depends. It depends. But one of the things that we also saw this year, because people weren't taking big trips anywhere, a lot of people didn't take vacation. So we are accumulating a lot of annual leave time, and some of this won't show up until next year's report, because a lot of it was accumulating in the second half of calendar year 20. But you see the percentage of vacation time, we call it annual leave, that people are taking is lower, but the percentage of leave they may be taking to care for a child may have increased. So it's very interesting. I think that there's going to be a lot of going forward. There will be a lot of case studies regarding what's happened during this time.
What's the term of the average leave?
I don't have that information for you. We might have it somewhere in the report, and if not, we can get that for you.
Well, if it's 30 days, but if it's 90 days or 120 days, that could get kind of serious.
Well, I think it all
Well, it
depends
does.
on the
If
circumstance.
someone is out prolonged, if someone is out for a prolonged absence, then it's not uncommon that they would hire someone for as a temporary for that position if it's critical. But it depends on the nature of the job, and it depends on the what you've got. If you've got a very large unit, you can probably cover for it, but other times you actually hire someone to fill in for the period. So if someone has a health problem that takes them out for 6 months, it's not uncommon that you might get a temporary to fill in. So there is cost, but it's so much of it's situational, depending on the job, depending on the number of employees in that group, what you have for backup, et cetera. And obviously the length of the absence.
And I can think of a good example in my department. It's about leave. It's not necessarily FMLA, but we have had an employee that's actually in that leave management unit that was deployed on military duty and is still deployed. And because the work in that department has so much increased, that unit so much increased, we did get a backfill for that person as a limited service position. So that person, it's kind of a double fill job, but while that person is out on military deployment, they're actually not getting their state salary or benefits for that time. So it's neutral to the department, our department, but sometimes it's not. And so if they're out on sick leave or something like that, it is an increased expense.
Yep.
I'm just looking at the clock, so I'm going to have you keep going on your screens here, Beth.
Yeah, I
Because
think
we really haven't gotten to the money yet.
I will get to the money page. Oh, wait, no. No. There we go. I think this is it. Oh, I just gotta move it into the right spot for you. Just so I can get it so you can all see it. That's not quite good. I don't know if I can reduce that just a tiny bit maybe so you can see the full page.
I was going to ask if there was some way you could make it bigger.
Oh, I can scroll back and forth, but I think I have the whole page in my screen, and I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're seeing, but you can see the top and the bottom. So you can see that our budget.
There's an awful lot of noise in your budget that doesn't amount to a lot of change in internal service funds allocation, et cetera. So if you look, most of it. So recognizing I've just gotten some new 299 readers here that would suggest that for operations, then the total increase for the year is 477, and it's a $10 million 086 388 request or spending.
Phil, do you have an iPad or computer?
No, a computer.
Oh, because on my iPad you can just touch the screen and push it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It stretches.
I will.
But what you can do is look. You'll have the page, and then you can enlarge it. But what she's showing is the ups and downs for the different divisions within the department. And it doesn't look, is there anything that you would like to point out that stands out, whether it's a very significant up or reflective of an initiative, or something that is a significant down because you did something special to address that cost?
Yes. So what I would like to show is it's we have three kind of budgets that we're showing there. And the top one is the human resources operations budget. And the very last line that's in white there, it's $125,000 up. That is for the work on the new classification system. So that is really our significant up. Our budget is a 0.8% increase, and that's the big significant up. The rest of it was a lot of rearranging, I would say, and moving things. What we were trying to do is move like costs with like, and moving things from one category to another category to make sure like all of the charges and all the expenses that we're doing as we move to programmatic budgeting, all the costs for statewide training are moved into the Center for Achievement and public service. So it's all moving into employee development training. So that's what really you're seeing for a lot of ups and downs. I don't know if Sean has any other things that we'd really like to point out, but that's really it. Salary.
The 125, which is to get ready for the job classification
Yes.
study. Good. Okay. And that's a one-time expenditure
Yes.
to do that work. Okay.
And another thing that we have that we are hoping to get funded for, which is not in our budget, which is in the ADS special fund that they're working to set up, is a new human capital management system, which will upgrade as our payroll system, and it's a system that we use to track all the employee information. That system is out of date. It's well beyond time to get a modern system in that area for our ability to just be able to have a good look into our employee, into our employee metrics, and as for management tools, and also for security reasons. I mean, it's time to do that upgrade, but that is all not contained in this budget. It's contained in the ADS budget.
Could you speak to that then? Is that a replacement of Vision?
That part is a replacement of VTHR.
VTHR, okay.
HR. So that's where people, most employees are going to know that's where they put in their timesheets. And that's where we process our payroll. That's where we also make any changes to what employees' salaries are going to do, any changes to their addresses. All our employee benefits are in that. So that's how we track employee benefits and sign up for people for benefits. So all that information is in there basically for all employees, current employees and past employees and their family members. Where their direct deposits go, all those type of things.
Okay. So I would say a 0.8 increase.
Yes.
And that's absorbing your salaries and second year of the contract negotiation.
Yes. Now,
pay
act.
Annualized of the first year. I mean,
right.
Because that was a one-time payment, so that's not like that was done differently this last time.
Yeah.
So are you going to be starting new negotiations for the next 2-year contracts then?
In the fall.
In the fall.
So yeah, as a reminder, what happened with Pay Act in last year in the first quarter budget, the legislature only funded 1 year of Pay Act. And they included money for all of the classified employees, provisions of the collective bargaining agreements, and decided to make any decision on the cost for the collective bargaining agreements in fiscal year 22 until this year. So in the governor's budget proposal, includes the Pay Act funding for fiscal year 22, which fully funds the collective bargaining agreements, and extending those provisions of the collective bargaining agreements to all branches of state government, or whatever their specific, the judiciary has their own collective bargaining agreement, whatever that would be. So that's how we included the money in the governor's budget.
So we'll be seeing a new contract
for fiscal year 2023, 24.
Yeah.
That hopefully we negotiate, we're able to negotiate this fall, and we can get to without coming to an impasse and going to, at this point, it would likely be an arbitrator if we reached impasse or last best offer. We went that far, but last time we were able to negotiate a contract at the table, which was different than the previous 2 budget cycles.
You can only do a 2-year contract. You don't try for a 3.
We would have to change the statute to do that.
And that would go through government ops. I don't know if that's ever been proposed. Has it, Beth?
I don't know if it's ever been proposed either. Right now, the budget cycles or the contract cycles are in line. It's with the State Labor Relations Act, it's kind of right in line and trying to follow the budget process, albeit a 2-year cycle, and trying to know what the costs are going to be in advance of you approving the budget for the coming fiscal year and the fiscal year after that. And it's the state labor relations law that we have is kind of all set up to do it that way. And yeah, that's the first time I've actually been asked that question. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know when I chaired the supervisory union school board that I was on for quite a few years, we went for a 3-year contract or a 4-year contract. Couldn't get the 4, but it saved us a lot of work, I'll tell you that.
Well,
It sure
contract
does.
negotiations are very time consuming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think it's just the hard part is just trying to really determine what the economy is going to look like and what your revenues and expenses are going to be that far out, especially since we're negotiating. This fall is when we'll start negotiating for fiscal year 23 and 24. So I think that
So you are out.
that the legislation was set up to kind of have that balance, at least do 2 years. So you're not negotiating something every year, but it doesn't go out. It keeps control with the legislature and not having to make decisions too far in advance, or the administration.
Okay, other questions or Senator Baruth? I can't see you on my screen here because
So I stopped the share.
Yeah, unless they're specific, but I can tell you with a 0.8% increase, there's probably not much there to ferret
Yeah.
out, other than the 125 that has been mentioned, which is to move us forward on looking at a replacement for a very old classification system. So other questions or, yes, did I hear you,
Yeah.
Rich?
Yeah, what's the total cost of a reclassification, or is this just preliminary to?
This is still preliminary. It's so the cost of the system could be up to like 800,000 to about, I think it's about 1.5 million, a new system. But
Yep.
but that doesn't include any costs of implementation that we might have to do related to changing of employees' wages or wage scales at the time of implementation. So the system itself is not the it's going to be a lot of work for our department, and it's going to be to change things, but a lot of the work is also going to be on how all those various pieces combine our classification and our compensation and our union contracts. And it's so figuring out what it's going to look like in the future to get a modern compensation system, a modern classification system that all parties think are the best way for Vermont's future. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort on.
I think we're pretty clear about that. We would have had a new system if, because Willis went in place in '86, and a lot of the work for that went back 5 or 6 or 7 years before that. So
I can't be that old, Rich.
well, the year they implemented Willis was '86, and I think he started work on this in '79.
Yeah, well, came after at least the work that we did on the implementation of our access system.
Yep. And
So,
but
yes, it's as I said, it's been a long time since this system was implemented. Other comments or questions? Phil, are you all set? It's pretty straightforward, or?
I think I am. That's not a lot in the ways of ups, really.
Yeah. Okay. And if you do have time and you want to, you're having trouble getting to sleep, look at all that report that they do every year. Will tell you everything you want to know about the number of state employees and, all the questions that people would ask. It's a very comprehensive document that is produced.
I could have used that last night around 1 a.m.
You could have?
Yeah, I should have known it was there. I would have read it.
It's a great read. I don't know what you're talking
Oh, yeah.
about. I don't think,
Wow.
I think that would keep you awake the rest of the night.
It would put me to sleep.
I think there's a word for
I was
that.
worried about Senator Baruth's birthday, that's all.
Oh, I think
Not
it's
knowing
called
how to celebrate.
soporific, right, Senator
Yes.
Baruth?
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
or Campion's article on the front page of the banner.
He's been missing the last few days. I think he's worried about school resource officers. He's got one bill to ban them, one bill to increase them. He doesn't know what to do.
Oh, Dave, doesn't that make you happy, Phil, that you're, well, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Oh.
Don't publicly I was going to say, gee, now that you're on appropriations, you're missing all that. So,
Yeah, I will just say that Brian's called me a couple of times, and each time I'm delighted that what we're discussing are his problems, not.
okay. So committee, unless we have further questions, we'll let the folks from Human Resources get back to their regular jobs.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
then
Thank you all.
Stephanie, you're there?
I'm here.
Okay. So one of the things that we had after this was a discussion around what might be our next expedited appropriations bill and what has been identified. We've had some conversation about what might be some potential items. And I gather from the chair of House Appropriations, they would like to take the lead on that. So, but the more work that we can do and the more testimony, the quicker that we can move something out once we receive it. And we may identify things that we would like to add as well. So, Stephanie, if you want to, we've kind of tried to think about some things. One that has come up, and I've mentioned it, and we have the treasurer coming in later in the week, and that is moving some money to that OPEB obligation because of the benefit it would have on, as we understand it, on the bond rating of the state. So that would be one item. Another item that we had talked about was, but I'm not sure it's necessary, and that would be the cost of doing the credit monitoring as a result of the mistake. It wasn't really a breach in the sense, it was a mistake where 1099s went out erroneously. But it sounds like that may be covered by the state's insurance plan. So that was one area, but we need to understand that better. The other part was with the additional FEMA 100% match. The governor had proposed 10 million general fund, but using CRF money, and that would be to get recommendations from our Economic Development Committee relative to the business grants, and what would be the what businesses would be targeted, what would be the criteria, because the big concern about business grants is that they were not as strategic as people felt they should be. And we spent a lot of time on that in joint fiscal, as Senator Sears will attest, and Senator Westman. And then, so Stephanie, maybe you can run us through the other area that I'd like to throw out, and that is we can go back to look at the governor's one-time proposed use of general fund. And there may be areas where we would say it makes sense to move that money out soon so that work could be done. And an example of that is what we need to do in state parks to get them ready. And that work could start in April and May, and it would allow work to move forward more quickly than it would if we waited for the traditional budget. So there's some proposed ideas from the Agency of Natural Resources on what that might be. So that's another area to take a look at that list. Yes, Phil.
This may not fall into this category, but Dick, I'm wondering about the pre-funding of the tax and regulate system. You know, the pump priming that we have to do on that.
Yep.
Is that something that could benefit from?
The question is, do you want it to be done? Does it have to move forward in a more quickly?
Well,
So if the money needs to be available in the spring?
That's my
I
question.
I think we need to actually, we're trying to schedule that next week to get an update from Michelle on where, because the governor's been late in appointing the board. And the board has to be confirmed by us, and she's afraid that this is gonna back everything up. And then we have various groups who want to make sure that certain reparations, or we follow a Illinois system where marginalized groups are first at the table and getting help to start businesses in the cannabis industry.
That would be in addition to what the bill already prescribes, where X% to prevention, and then
Yeah,
a certain amount
They're
goes to.
proposing, I believe, 20% of the revenue go to that group.
Well, the reason I ask is
Yeah, but there is the startup cost, you're right.
yeah,
Mhm.
and it seems to me that what's likely to happen, unless we push back against it, is it'll get, the instead of the 18 months originally contemplated, it'll be 2.5 years, and that's a huge chunk of revenue that we'll lose.
Yeah.
And just without pre-guessing where that money's going to go, you know, if for instance it went to the state colleges, that's a chunk we would have to come up with out of general fund, because the CRF will be gone by then.
Yep. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, if it's possible to jumpstart and pre-fund some of the activities of the commission. We could start asking that question next week when Michelle's there to see what we can do. We have S25, which can be a vehicle, or we can put it in as part of an appropriation.
And I think there are two different questions. One is it a use that fits itself to the one time? And what are the advantages using the one time versus advancing the money and expecting the system to pay it back?
Right.
And the other is, does it have to move? Is it more time sensitive to move more quickly than the big bill? So that's the other consideration.
I don't know
Becca?
about time sensitive.
Okay, so it's something we want put on our list. It's not on the governor's list. The question then is, do we deal with it in the big bill, or
Yeah,
should it?
Let's start that process in judiciary next week and see
Okay.
what we can find out, because it
okay.
probably would be helpful to know that you're not cutting into some other group's money by doing this early.
Can I just ask a question? Since I don't deal with this all the time, the first year of revenue was how much?
There won't be much. There wouldn't be any.
So you actually have to advance the money
You
to
have to
do the
advance money
administrative work.
because you wouldn't, I don't believe you'd have money other than when the dispensaries, the medical dispensaries move to the cannabis, under the Cannabis Control Boards, those fees and that income would go to the Cannabis Control Board. So there would be some money there.
So
But other than that, you don't have any income until you start to charge for fees for growers and processors. And inspectors.
What about license fees and all that?
That's what would come, but the board has to set a number of rules. That's the concern that Michelle expressed to me the other day, was that with the delay, what does this do to the timeline, which we had all planned on? How far back does this push it? So before you would get any revenue,
You've got to pay out to get the administrative structure set up before we get a dime back.
right.
And so
Right.
that's,
but is that those fees would pay for that, so it would be paying for itself? Or if we preloaded it,
well,
would we be able to take that money in the next year out?
well, that's what we have to deliberate. Is it better to
I
advance
think
it
it's
sort of
probably going to need
internal?
2 years of help before it is self-sufficient.
But the fundamental
Counting this
question
year. Counting
is,
this.
do we actually fund it through this one-time mechanism, or do we fund it through an advancement through the state's cash flow and recoup it once the revenues start flowing in. Once we've spent the general fund, it's gone and not available for anything else, as opposed to sort of the advancing of the money to do this with the understanding that once those revenues start flowing, the cost of setting up this program are being borne by the program. So that, I think that's what Rich is asking. And that's what we have to consider here in terms of, is it better to advance it with the understanding that the program pays it back as opposed to taking one-time general fund?
Right, because the timing could make a huge difference to us.
I'm
So-
not sure.
So, and I
I
don't
don't
think we
know.
know the answer yet today.
I don't know. I need to understand how much, I mean, we were supposed to have had the board already appointed on January 15th.
Becca, you had a comment? Becca?
Actually, I have, my internet is unstable this afternoon, but I think I've got the gist of what we've got now. There were chunks I missed, but I think I'm good.
Okay. Stephanie, do you have a comment on the,
It's just that we did, when we set it up, we allowed the excess receipt. We actually made the appropriation. We set it up as a special fund that would have a deficit that would be paid back when the taxes started flowing in. So
Right.
we did have a construct that allowed the administrative cost to go forward. The timing issue, I don't know if anything, one-time money up front would actually help the timing issue if the timing is about, how quickly you get the members on board. It may help, some one-time funding may help with additional support if needed to make up time. But the whole construct was set up that way to
that the
allow.
program would finance its own costs?
Yeah, that we would allow deficit spending to a certain point, and then as the tax revenue came in, the first thing it had to do was pay off that deficit so that we were true to an excess receipt construct.
But so today, what we're just trying to do is think about ways to think about what might move forward in a more expeditious fashion than simply waiting and being part of the big bill. Bobby, you have your 250 you want,
Well,
or is that the big bill?
I'm wondering about moving it forward sooner and using some one-time money to do it with. And then if it's a year or two before that money starts coming back, that might work out good for the 23 or helping with the 23 or 24 budget. When COVID and FEMA and all this federal money is disappeared, we would have that money coming back to help whoever's doing the budget do the budget.
Yeah, those are all the aspects of that need to be considered, what's the best funding mechanism to use. And so that isn't something we're going to obviously wrangle today. That I guess, Dick, you're going to get more information.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so as Stephanie points out, the startup is probably doesn't change the cost, but what it does is change when we're going to start seeing those revenues flow and when those upfront expenditures are going to start being experienced. So Stephanie, you want to, we had kind of sat down and did some brainstorming. So if you want to take us through that list.
Okay, so the chair mentioned the OPEB piece, which the idea there is that the treasurer is going to the marketplace for bonds in March. And the idea behind the OPEB piece would be to have pre-funding to see if there's an amount of one-time funding that we can dedicate to some of our OPEB liabilities that would allow the accountants and Wall Street to see that we are serious about creating a pre-funding for the OPEB. that does, it's a tight time frame for something that probably would involve some policy development around a commitment to ongoing OPEB funding. But it sets sort of a time bar given that March construct. Other pieces in that might be considered are all pretty much off the governor's one-time list. Like there's $20 million for VHCB housing in the governor's one-time list. It might benefit to have those dollars or part of those dollars appropriated earlier than the timing of the big bill. Same thing with broadband. There are several pieces in the A&R world. The state parks was mentioned, but also investment in outdoor recreation is a part of a grant program included in the governor's budget proposal. There are pieces related to CRF in the education world that could be considered to be, if there's directives of use of those dollars, that's a piece that could be included. I'll stop there for a moment to see if there's some more questions.
And the CRF is money that we allocated but has not been spent. And there's potential that more could be done for the air, the HVAC and that area. So
What were you thinking on the broadband for a dollar?
We need to have some discussion about broadband because if we use general fund, which is what the governor is proposing, then we have more freedom to use it in a way that we think makes sense and to set standards around what we're supporting or procuring. There has been a lot. We were very disappointed that with the CRF money, we were constrained through what the rules would allow us. So the advantage of this money, but this is going to take some work, and maybe the House committee on technology will be taking a look at that. But I know our Senate Finance has been spending a lot of time, and people have different views in terms of what should be the requirements that go for the money, and also the extent to which the money is directed to support the development of their CUDs, for example, and setting standards. So if how to protect the state's interest in investment, if something should not materialize, how to protect those resources. So there's a lot there that would require some policy work before we would release any of the money to set for Vermont to say, this is our money, this is how we think it can be spent in the best way and most strategically, and how our investment can be protected. And that's the work that would fall to our Finance Committee, and in the House would be the Technology Committee. So conceivably, if they want to start the bill, which the chair said she would like to do, some of that analysis and some of that policy development would be done in the bill as it comes over. Senator Westman.
So off and on, we've heard that there will be more federal money coming, and that broadband is at the top of the list of the federal government. And so do we have any indication from anybody that there is work going on in Washington around that? I wouldn't want to stop the governor's money if not, but if there is, maybe we shouldn't jump out in front of some idea of what the feds are going to do before with state money before we knew what they were going to do.
Well, I just have this communication from, I don't know how to pronounce, from Senator Leahy's office, and it said the House released their draft for the COVID relief package. This package is built off President Biden's American Rescue Plan, and as such, remains focused on the COVID response rather than long-term infrastructure.
Okay.
That said, there is a potential for some, and this was more in the housing, arena. Some housing constructions to be included in the homelessness assistance section. So there's a housing portion, and because our concern was around not being able to do capital investments in housing in the long term, that it was all, more assistance. So it just seems focused on COVID response rather than long-term infrastructure. So it's hard to know at this point whether how much will be there for broadband or for the support for local government. Said Senator Leahy's pushing hard for additional state and local aid and small state minimums in the COVID relief package under negotiation. But it's a lot to be determined, but it seems like they're building off the Biden plan. That's the latest on that. So that's the dilemma, in terms of how much you move out. And the other part is whether there's anything else in terms of work that we would want to move forward. But housing, I did have a conversation Sunday with Gus, and he said there might be a couple of projects ready to go. One was in Chittenden County, and just because of the time constraint, with the CRF funding wasn't possible within that time frame. So there may be he was somewhat guarded in his response in terms of how much he could move out more quickly than would go through the big bill. Bobby?
Yeah, I don't know, but we ought to think about this a little. We talked a lot about doing things for food security and making sure that there's ample food. And we've done a lot of work in the Ag Committee in regards to that subject matter and that issue. And if you don't get money out until after July to do planting or anything like that, it's kind of late in the season, and we might want to think a little bit if we can get something put together that's gonna have an effect in, most seeds go in the ground in May, and might need some money for that to get it started early. That's all.
Did you get any reading on the bill that was passed in December? It was a lot for small business. Do you know whether there was anything for farmers as part of that business component?
No, I don't remember anything being.
I don't remember anything either. I'm just wondering if your agency of ag folk can tell us whether under that, because there was money there in that bill and it was going out directly to businesses. I think a lot of it was whether there was whether there was anything in there to help ag as a part of that business sector.
I'll check that tomorrow, so
Okay.
We'll know by the end of the week if there's something there.
Okay, because we have done some that has been done. To obviously assist farmers, and that is timing because you don't generally plant your corn in July.
No, if you do, you don't get much of a crop.
No, you don't. Okay, well, if you can check that out, I'm sure you won't let that fall. Are there any other, Phil? Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned HVAC, and I was thinking of two different things. One, I think it was up to 17 million as of the last infusion for schools. And so because no doubt they've had to stop whatever work they were doing, but if it were possible to get more money into that program, if Efficiency Vermont thought that there was additional work that could be done, it might help for them to be able to order the machinery, because that's one of the things that held up the work, was that there was backlog in ordering. So if they could order sooner, that could conceivably mean that they have the contractors scheduled and the parts assembled when school lets out in June.
Well, since the deadline has been pushed out, and they did not revert the CRF money yet, did they, Stephanie?
It
No,
did not. So there's both CRF money still available in the Agency of Education line items of CRF, but there's also the ESSER money. We put a small chunk of it toward the Burlington issue. But there's, aside from one-time general fund, education is one place where being directive about the existing federal funds might be beneficial.
yeah, I was just going to suggest that maybe I could check in with them if it looks like they're going to exceed the amount that we've appropriated into that project. Maybe we could,
The question I think before us on that too is if there's still CRF money unexpended with the new slug of 128 million that's going out to them, how much of that new federal money can be used for that purpose, which means that we could consider the CRF money unexpended for other purposes.
And then one more thing I wanted to throw in that bucket. In judiciary, we had a lot of testimony around the wave of court activity that needs to happen once they begin trying. And HVAC is a big issue there as well, because all of the courthouses, not all of them, but many of them need HVAC work. And so I was wondering if Efficiency Vermont couldn't expand out what they're doing into the courthouses, since they already have an operation and an accounting up and running. And that's something that getting a program expanded to them, if they wanted to do it, could take advantage of a few more months. Dick, I don't know if that makes any sense to you. But I suggested that when they were in committee that they get in touch with Efficiency Vermont, or we do it, and see if we couldn't broaden that program out to the courthouses.
Okay.
Oops, you're muted, Dick.
Unmuted. Story of my life. I still want to reach Pat Gable and find out what the courts need. But, my understanding was, and we should probably get an update on where the jury restart is. But they do need to get many of the courtrooms, when they did that study, I don't know if you saw that, there's a study out of that all the courtrooms, they looked at them, what the air ventilation was like and so forth. And many were lacking, particularly the county courthouses that handle the civil trials that are owned by counties.
So did BGS do that study?
I think knowing the court, they probably hired somebody.
I think they might have done it, which
Might have been BGS. Do you remember seeing it, Alice?
I remember the mention of BGS at some point, and it seems like we should maybe take a look at that study.
Yeah, well, I got it last winter, yeah.
The question is, if it isn't on the list, we can add it for one time, but is that something that would have to be spun out in 2 weeks?
Well, they don't feel it's as much of an emergency as we do.
Well, if they don't feel it's an emergency, then you know exactly what the implementation will be.
Yeah.
You've been around a while, Senator Sears.
I know.
If their heart's not in it.
Well, I think
It won't happen.
It's a real problem.
Yeah, it is. And I think
Well,
I
probably
I
until we
think,
get,
I think getting that report, and I'd have a hard time finding it myself, but
Yeah.
if we could ask them for the startup
Okay.
report.
well, we can take a look at that in terms of, and then of course, the other thing is, even though the big bill will take longer, you can make certain things effective upon passage,
Yeah.
which could get us into because I don't know as if the startup is going to happen to any great extent until we get a fairly significant percentage of our Vermonters immunized.
I would agree. I would agree. Well, but they've already, I mean, they know Wyndham County's fine. They could start up Wyndham County tomorrow if they could, if they felt that we weren't in such a crisis.
So what I have so far, and then you're going to take, maybe Judiciary will spend a little bit more time on where we are with the tax and regulate, as well as start up the jury restart. But in terms of having people in, we can have, we've already got the treasurer scheduled on the OPEB. I don't know whether this is something Steve has been looking at or Chris in joint fiscal. We can take some testimony from A&R on state parks, and the VORAC grants are to them as well, Stephanie.
I believe so. They go through A&R.
Okay, and then any other one times. The other thing too, when we had the big tobacco settlement, we didn't spend some things all in one year. Remember, we set aside the money for improving the child welfare system, and we carried money over a multi-year period of time. So there's the other issue around IT projects. And I don't know whether there are any that are ready to move now or could start another module. Obviously, the question around that, the governor just did a 52 million slug, but I don't know what's underneath that. So in terms of helping schedule folk, that's all I'm thinking about, who we should schedule. So we have Treasurer Pierce. I'm going to suggest we go to the state parks and maybe have Gus come in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Chrissy, other
I
thoughts?
do have A&R. They're scheduled for Tuesday. Each of the departments are coming in. They're pretty much your whole day on Tuesday. So we combine that with Parks and Rec? Okay. Thank you.
And I'm going to send an email to Pat Gable asking her to send a copy to Christie of the startup, of the court startup, and asking if they have any information on air ventilation and how it might help. Is that okay?
Sure. I'm just wondering in terms of what remains on the COVID response, because for President Biden, a big emphasis is the safe startup of schools. And it seems like if there's anything that would seem like a potential area where more money would be coming in, it would be for schools, which would argue any unexpended CRF would come back and be used for other things, simply because I can't help but believe that there's not going to be a lot more money coming in on the education front, because his priority is getting schools started and started safely.
Yep.
Okay. So anything else? It's about 3:45. Becca, we have another meeting, right, at 4:15? Okay.
Yes, I believe I was just checking to see. I think it is 4:15.
Okay.
Just one other large item that's on the governor's one-time list in the GF is weatherization related pieces.
Oh, yeah.
And that could potentially benefit from an earlier, partially starting earlier than the big bill.
And was that weatherization both through the OEO, low income weatherization as
It's-
well?
It's all over the map.
Okay. And some of it was to do low interest or no interest loans? Is that, it seems like, and that went to,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a part of it.
and
It's a-
where, and
Where-
what entity would administer those?
I will get the detail for you.
Okay,
That's,
we can schedule whoever's the right people, we'll
Pretty
put
cool.
that on
Yeah.
too, because weatherization is, we've talked about that as another, as Stephanie just mentioned, as something that,
Yeah, I-
um,
Natural Resources will have a recommendation over to you.
On weatherization? Oh,
Yeah, because we've been taking a lot of testimony.
but from whom?
All the players involved, the bank, everything from the banks to the credit unions to all OEO. We had OEO in this morning, or we had the community action agencies in this morning.
Okay. Well, then, since I've been doing some of that work, the question that becomes which is the administering state agency? OEO, we know for low income. Who would be the state entity that we would hear from, that would get the appropriation for the other piece?
We can get you a list. I've got
Stephanie
some-
will probably be able to figure that
Yep.
out.
yeah,
You will.
I just need to get to a different sheet. Hold on a second.
And Jane, that meeting's at 4:30, not 4:15. So you have a little bit.
4:30. I say we go for it all. To me, that's going to be the fundamental question. What is the benefit to split it up and take more time, on certain areas?
So it's listed here as Vermont Housing Finance Agency, Rapid Mobilization and Savings is 16 of the 25. The OEO program is 4 of the 25, and the remaining 5 is BGS.
For the
For
state
energy.
buildings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's $1.5 million going to one of the to replace with electric vehicles too. In that last 5 million.
And weatherization?
It's in the whole package of the 25. Yep.
Okay, but we're talking about the weatherization piece, so.
Well, weatherization it's a $25 million package, but it's not all weatherization.
Must be energy and weatherization, even though the subheading is weatherization.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, well, we can start with the weatherization piece. And how much we want to move out now. The big, obviously, the more we move out, the more we're committing and the more we're setting priorities. Let's be honest here in terms of what is on that list. And so the more we commit now, then means that the other things that we might have on our list, it influences what we have at the end to move around. That's all I'm saying. It's the more you pre-fund, people will be very happy, but it also means that we're setting the priority that expenditure is one of our top priorities.
And we won't have this money later if something pops up where we
Or
really
a new need.
need
That's the balancing here. But some of the recommendations we say are without question priorities up for spending that we would want to move ahead. So that's all I'm saying is inherent in doing that is that we are setting those as our priorities out of that entire list.
It also is a year where you might have obviously additional, more flexible funds from the federal government under a next package that is, wide open for revenue replacement, which as opposed to the very targeted funds. So you might, it's a slightly different balance than normal years in terms of, and it's same thing with the FMAP increase that might extend even a further quarter than we're expecting.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got at least enough to get going in terms of both the budget and the what we might want to move ahead on a faster track. And Becca, I don't know whether obviously the whole governor's proposal on the 10 million is something I would imagine economic development is getting a handle. What businesses are being
We're trying to.
targeted, et cetera, because if we move money out for business grants, then I think there's been strong feeling we need to be much more
Yes.
definitive in where that money is going, making sure that it's going to where the need's the greatest, and how that gets defined.
Yes.
Because 10 million to go out
That
just
is-
because you haven't gotten anything in the past or didn't apply, I don't have a sense of what the proposal is at this point.
I want to, if I could, just mention something that's near and dear to my heart. And that's just how the heck do we get as much vaccine as we can into those Vermonters that need it the most? And I'm getting daily, I'm sure you all are, and I know there's money coming from Biden and there's new talk about vaccine, but down here in Bennington County, we're in a crisis mode. Our numbers are sky high.
They just said,
You have
And
Walgreens?
23% of the people, they just gave me a document that 23% of the people are from out of state that got COVID in Bennington County.
that,
I mean, we're not doing our enforcement. We're not doing, and I don't know what committee should be looking at this, but if 23% of the people in Bennington County, that's almost a quarter of the cases are out of staters.
Do they have numbers on who are New York residents who are healthcare workers in Vermont? I mean,
I
that
don't believe all they had was
the overall number.
the overall numbers.
Are they
I can-
visitors, Dick?
It
I don't
doesn't
know.
say what they are, but
Yeah.
I think we need, right now, the 7-day positivity rate in Bennington County is 3.6% versus 1.7% statewide.
And Rutland was
Fast-
high too.
Yeah, in the past 2 weeks, 48% of the cases in Bennington County had contact with another, the past 2 weeks, 20% of the cases in Bennington County are non-Vermont residents. And the other information would be,
Where are they getting tested then?
yeah, how come they're even being tested?
Where
they're getting tested either inEnnington or Manchester.
you can get tested.
Why?
I mean, there were people getting vaccines from New York when there were 2 New York cars in front of and coming in when I was leaving.
But they verify, supposedly you have to verify you're a Vermont resident.
I
Well-
don't know whether they were workers, essential workers that live in New
Oh.
York that work in
Oh,
Vermont.
could be, it could be.
I couldn't see the age, but
Because when you register to get it, you have to verify right now that you're your age, that you're over 75 and you're a Vermont resident.
right.
Is there, Walgreens is getting a big shipment. Do you have a Walgreens
We
in?
do,
Yeah.
but the problem is that's the federal shipment. It's not the state.
Yeah, they'd still have to register, wouldn't they?
The state is still talking about working it so that the signups, I think, go through them rather than just to the store.
Well, all I can say is that I
They're
think
working.
we ought to be, I mean, it's gonna hit somebody else next.
But the question, Dick, what I don't understand is the thinking that the governor and the commissioner of health should alter for those high areas the criteria of who gets the
No, the thinking is, I
immunizations?
think we have to get more enforcement of the rules right down here. And we should prioritize vaccinations for those that are high risk right here right now.
But then you are talking about altering.
Well, they're doing it
because-
by population. So if the state gets 500 doses, the percentage that goes to Chittenden County, the percentage to Caledonia County, the percentage to Bennington County is based upon the population. And I would love a conversation about whether that's the wisest thing to do to prevent these outbreaks. I'm not suggesting that we change the
Okay,
way
well,
they're
I
doing
thought
it.
our health and welfare, I thought Jenny was taking that up, but
Well,
I don't know, Becca.
And
You know,
I
don't know.
put that back on her radar screen this morning when I was getting the reports out of Bennington and Rutland. Yeah, no, it's
They,
So
They
I
said
just,
on the-
I'm not suggesting that we get, 40-year-olds done and the rest of the state has a problem.
But you're saying
I'm
you should
suggesting that we
accelerate
should
the older.
accelerate the dosage. If we're
Yeah.
doing it by population, then us, maybe 8% of the population lives in Bennington County. I don't know, just a guess.
Yeah.
And, 25 to 30% lives in Chittenden County.
So what you would do is accelerate the
Bill, and
vaccination
they've got
rate
problems
for
there.
your,
It should be accelerating the vaccination process to communities that are hardest hit. Right now, on the other hand, if 20%, if 23% are from out of state or non-Vermont residents, and I don't have it broken, those figures aren't broken down. I can send them to you, Becca, if that would help. I can send the report to you. But that tells me also that those communities that are on the border are in jeopardy, and that may be why Rutland and Bennington are so high. Rutland is also on the border with New York, and a
so
lot of their workers.
if you lowered your percentage by 25, your numbers would be down pretty good.
but
Why not send it to Mike Smith? He seems to be the one that's,
Those came from Mike Smith.
it came from Mike Smith, but
Well, it came from the numbers came from the Department of Health.
but Mike Smith has been addressing a lot of those issues with regard to other people getting them, and I think he has a handle on that. I mean, knowledge.
But I guess what Senator Sears is asking, and I don't know whether this is, Becca, it's hard to know what that means, the out of state, and how they should be addressed. But I think what you're also questioning is the distribution methodology that should not be just based on population over a certain age, but also factor in the rate of infection, because it means those higher risk people in those regions need to get vaccinated faster than maybe somebody in another area of the state where the rate's very low. I'm talking about the over 70 or the over 75. Get.
Okay. I just sent it to everybody on appropriations.
Okay.
It's an interesting document, at the very least.
This
Uh-huh.
morning, Dick, they were saying that they'd set up another outlet there in Bennington County
It
to,
was Manchester, wasn't
That's
it?
for testing. They've got 2 testing sites open this week, and
this wasn't testing. I thought it was vaccinating sites.
no, that's the
And
South. The vaccinations. You have to either go to. I think there's one location in Manchester, but it's not open daily. People from Manchester are coming down to Bennington because theirs is not open daily, and that's not it's less than 30 miles, so that's not.
The pharmacies right now, Kinney is administering vaccines,
Yeah, we
but
don't have
they're
any
doing it,
cities.
and they're doing it so that they're reporting back to the health department. So it's being done under the auspices of the health department.
Right.
So they're collecting the data. I would assume the same thing would be true for the other
I don't
pharmacies.
believe Walgreens has it yet.
No.
None of the pharmacies here do, and that's one of the problems for the mountain towns that both Senator Ballant and I represent.
They can,
If you try to get from Dover to get it, like, I think you have to go to Grace Cottage.
for some of the mountain towns, they can go to Weston,
I worked a little bit yesterday. It was good.
which is,
But
Peru.
But we have 2 things, one of which is mountain towns and people coming from out of state that might be there and need testing. The other is what Vermonters, because the vaccine right now, maybe the federal rules come in differently, but what has been made available right now, you have to verify You either are one of those frontline health workers, you're in a nursing home where they're bringing it to, or if you're just a regular citizen, you have to verify that you're a citizen, you're a resident, or you intend to reside
Over
here
75.
and you're over 75.
Right.
So, nobody can just walk into these clinics unless they are pre-registered and meet the criteria.
Great. It's all about supply and demand,
Yeah.
and we don't have the supply. But doing it by population, rather than, it might be better to be doing it by where the outbreaks are.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, accelerate the
That's
vaccination.
all I'm questioning, and if the Health and Welfare Committee looks at that. I mean, the report came from the Department of Health, so I trust, they
Yeah.
know what's happening.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
from what I can hear from you, it's not that you want to adjust based upon age. What you want to do is say, we'll use the age as the basis, but within the categories, you would move quicker the doses to the places where there are hot outbreaks for those age groups. That's
Similar to
not,
what they've done with the population of those that are families that are living together. And I assume that's more Winooski and some of those areas where large immigrant populations are living together. They are actually vaccinating people that are not in that age group, but that's because within that family dwelling, there is somebody over 75.
Mhm.
So, Dick, according to the way you would do it, if you were bad and had all kinds of good parties and you had everybody exposed and they all came down with it, you'd send all the vaccination to that area.
There's
and
no
then the
question, Bobby, there's no question that we've fallen down on the enforcement end. There is the number of restaurants in Bennington County that should have had an enforcement action against. I know I'm saying that live on YouTube. Everybody knows it. And it's kind of sad.
There's one on my main street in Ludlow, where there are, of course, a lot of people. It is outdoors, totally outdoors, a drinking establishment with outdoor fires. And you drive by there and it's shoulder to shoulder outdoor on the street, but clearly is.
You're just asking for it. And that's what I meant by the enforcement also.
Okay.
Right. One of the things that we've talked about,
you're
Frozen.
You're frozen.
Jeremy, huh?
So, I'm going to suggest, since Becca's frozen and we have a meeting at 4:30 on
You
something
better
else.
get her
I hope Becca gets
unfrozen.
unfrozen by 4:30.
I know. So I'm going to suggest that we adjourn this meeting and go